Welcome to Afrikindness podcast. Yes, a podcast dedicated to showcasing the richness and diversity of African culture. Join us as we explore the past, present, and future of the African continent and challenge common myths and stereotypes. Whether you're a non-African interested in learning more about the continent or an African seeking to connect with your roots, this podcast is for you. Yes, we aim to educate, entertain, and encourage through natural, authentic, and conversational dialogue. From solo commentaries to panel discussions, we'll share our experiences, stories, and expert views using metaphors, analogies, humor to help you discover the beauty and pride of Africa. Yes!
Hello, beautiful listeners, and welcome to another episode of Afrikindness podcast. This is where we celebrate the African culture, challenge stereotypes, and, of course, spread kindness like pepper in your jollof rice. I like to say that. I'm your host, Peace Judge, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be back with my two incredible guests. Guys, you have no idea. They're here. It's a miracle, and I'm loving it today, really. So joining us once again are two esteemed returning guests, the remarkable Dr. Ollie Folayan. Hello, Doctor.
Hello, thank you for having me again.
You're welcome, sir. And of course, the inspiring Isabella. Welcome, Isabella.
Hi, thank you for having us back. Lovely to be here.
Here you are. Thank God. Woo! Right, so wonderful. Today's episode is going to be both fun and enlightening as we explore the consequences of internalizing stereotypes for an African individual and even the African community as a whole. And we will uncover some maybe even psychological, social, and economic implications that stem from these damaging narratives. But first, let me check in with my guests. How are you all doing? It's been a while.
Yeah,
good. Very good.
Good.
Very good.
All right, well done.
Even better for being here with you.
Yeah, likewise. Good vibes all around.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. All right, so moving on, we're going to get started. Very much amazing. So, Dr. Ollie, let's talk about the implication. Of course, we've talked about stereotypes for a while now, and I'm sure that our listeners and our viewers, they're not getting tired yet because this is a serious issue that must be trashed out. So the more we unveil things, the more we find things that should be explored. But today I want us to very quickly talk about the consequences of internalizing stereotypes for the individual and the community as a whole. So some things happened. I went on the street actually to talk to some people, and I realized that they wanted to talk about anything else but stereotype. Some have normalized it. Some I'm sure would know what it is, So I want us to talk about the impact on us as a community, and what is it how does it affect the African family? I want us to just take a 360 view of all of it because there's a lot to talk about. So over to you, Doctor.
Oh, right. Okay. So I think, and this is just going back to this idea around stereotypes. Stereotypes are generally, or prejudice is generally a structural impact of certain things, perceived socioeconomic power or worth, and perceived interdependence. And nothing kind of typifies that stereotype as or that idea as this. I don't know if you've seen this video online where you have a small child who is a black child, and another one was a refugee, and they're hanging out in a city square. I'm not sure what city, and this black child is completely ignored. And then the same child is, and then that child is replaced with another child, who, should I say, looks a lot more Western. And all of a sudden, the community is suddenly interested in the welfare of this child. The previous child was pretty much invisible. The other child is there and is being looked after. And the thing is, how do we get to that particular point? There is a whole infrastructure and certain reinforced ideas that has led to that situation. And quite a lot of the people who walk by on the other side are not bad people. They're just used to a certain, they have just grown up in a world and grown accustomed to an idea that only puts certain people in the periphery and certain people in the center. And so if we're going to start with the impact of that, the real impact of it is that the world is denied the value that these particular people bring, their insights, the extent of their intelligence. And within the context of the workplace, it also means that there are sometimes such low expectations that they too can never really live to their full potential. We know that context drives behavior, and when you are functioning in a context, and I found this to be true in the secular environment, if you like, or and even in the environment of those of them who call themselves the diversity lobby, it's just as bad. And so that stereotype, the impact it has is denies everyone, because those individuals never get to live out their full self-actualization.
Oh wow, thank you for that, Isabella. You want to take it away?
I was jotting some things down there. I think, there are a few really obvious, you mentioned about families there, African families, and I think there are a few really obvious examples to quote there in terms of stereotypes of that particular group. So as Ollie kind of touched on, the adultification of our children. And I think we touched on last time we spoke, this feeling that a lot of Westerners and Caucasians still view us as enslaved people or slaves. And I think it all goes back to that, right? If you think about it, back then, our children were expected to work at very, very, very young ages. And so they were adultified from a very young age. And I think there's still a little bit of that. And I think that's some of what comes through in that video that is heartbreaking, Ollie. I've seen that video. And yeah, the little Western child is doted on and everyone's worried about her. And the little black girl, everyone just looks at her like, okay, she can cope for herself. Where does that mindset come from? I think it's still a throwback to all those years ago. And then the other thing that I think has to be touched on particularly with African families and black families is this concept of the absent black father, which actually could not be further from the truth. And I think, they love to sow this narrative that, black men are more interested in criminal activity and things like that. And so therefore seeding that with this narrative of the dads aren't around, they're off doing this, that and the other, and therefore the mother's left to hold the children. And it's all part of that, let's make it seem like a negative picture, like these aren't good people, they aren't familial people, which again, it could not be further from the truth. So there was actually a fascinating piece of research done recently by the CDC, and it proved that black fathers are actually far more likely to spend time with their children doing activities like, bathing, changing nappies, feeding them, reading stories to them, spending quality time with their children. And they found that this is more likely activity to be conducted by black fathers than by Asian or white fathers. So, that there is very much a stereotype that underpins all of those narratives. And I think that really needs to be unpicked, because we then spend so much time trying to prove ourselves against those narratives that, as Ollie says, I totally agree, they actually miss out on so much knowledge and wisdom that we could be bringing to the conversation and bringing to the party.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. I love that you even mentioned the African family, because I really want us to break it down that way. I feel like we all know that families make up the society. And so I want us to kind of zoom in on the family and see how this might affect us collectively. So talking about internalizing stereotypes for the individual. And Isabella, you mentioned the father, so let's start from there. In a situation where the father is suffering lowered self-esteem or self-confidence, say from work and all of that, how do you see that affecting the whole family, and then, broadly, the whole community? Dr. Ollie?
That's a really kind of layered question, because just picking up on what just what Isabella was just saying, you've almost got two layers that you're kind of having to deal with. You've got the stereotype that is down to race, and you've got the perceived socioeconomic deprivation, or at least that perception, that danger of a single story when you're African as well. And it's that those two layers that you're constantly having to deal with. And what that then means is that when you get into the workplace, and I really like something that Isabella just touched on there, which is around this, what we call the intersectionality of men. And we sometimes think about men as a monolith, as a privileged lot, but the experiences and what the data shows are those stereotypes. And I say there's somebody who is a sort of co-chair of an organization, co-founder of an organization, my sister, and we've become both really conscious of it, that there are times when the behavior that was meted out towards even sort of me in that situation, we both recognize that there is a stereotype that is taking place. So the impact it has, if one's not careful, it's just that self-doubt, and it's the exhaustion. There is a reason why Black men who live in the West are far more likely, there's a higher number of cases around mental health issues than, say, Black men that live in Africa. There's no other correlation other than the impact of continuously, one, having to swim against a very sort of difficult tide, having to work against particular stereotypes and preconceptions that people have, and constantly feeling like you've got to prove yourself. And as we said in the previous one, overcompensating, it leads to exhaustion, and it just leads to that sense that people then get home after such a difficult time, and everybody gets it. And there is a tendency, and it's a weakness, I would say, in many men, that we would tend to define ourselves by the work that we do, and when things aren't going so well in the workplace, it becomes something that everyone it seems to have a bigger impact on just a general sense of well-being, and then the ability to really kind of be present in the workplace. And I think the way that we get around that, and the way that is just continue to counter a lot of those stereotypes with counter narratives. Provide a counter narrative. How do you know that? And what is it that makes you think this? And it's something that is a healthy thing for all of us to constantly kind of live in an environment where our own assumptions are constantly being challenged, because that's what's going to help us all collectively grow.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Dr. Ollie. So that was brilliant. Isabella, this one is for you. Just something that Dr. Ollie said that struck me just about now, our own perception of ourselves. And I'm thinking right now back to when I came into this country and I had a baby. And then I got a letter that said that I had to come and check my cervical, whatever. And I was like, what are they checking anyways? Because we didn't have that in Nigeria. I was like, well, how am I going to go then? But it got to a point Well, so I had 2 other babies, and I have 4, by the way. So I had 2. I can't be. Okay, so I had 2 other ones, right? And then I got this letter. Each time I would get this letter, and I was there. The letter said, "I don't have to find. Why would I want them to find out these things? I don't care. We don't check these things in Nigeria. You have your baby, you move on." However, it seems like we're having this conversation. I'm seeing another aspect of this. Do you think that one of the social implications of this might be that maybe sometimes we even think we have the one that us? Sometimes Bumi and I talk and say, okay, maybe the opportunities are not there, maybe they're not available to us as they are made available to others. However, the few opportunities that we have, would you say that the social implication of the stereotype, even those perceptions that we have normalized, would now be, maybe I don't deserve it? Because I'm thinking about the other part of it. Maybe I don't deserve it. I'll be okay with that. What do you say about that, Isabella?
Yes, I want to touch on a couple of things that you just talked about there. So if we can stick a pin in your question, I want to go back to something that you said about gynecology.
Yeah.
Ollie's nodding because I think he knows what I'm...
Yes, I talked about the cervical check.
Yeah.
Which is free, by the way, in the UK, but I wasn't just interested for some reason.
But you know that we have African women to thank for cervical checks. Did you know that?
Oh wow! Thank you for saying that.
Ollie knows this. There was a white doctor called James Marion Sims, and he's often referred to as the father of gynecology. But what they don't tell you is that the people that he tested his theories, his medicine on, I get a bit choked up just talking about this because it's an incredibly painful and horrible story. But he literally tested those things on 3 in particular black enslaved women with no anaesthetic because of that perception that black people don't feel pain the same way as other people do. And so, basically we have 3 unnamed women to thank for that, but there's some really interesting images online. If you were to Google the father of gynecology, there's a beautiful and really powerful painting of him standing at the head of the table with these 3 women cowering, knowing what's about to come. And actually it's them that we have to thank in the Western world for gynecology. So I think that was an important story to tell there. And then back to your question piece, I think the danger is always the self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes.
Right? You get told something enough times, you end up digesting it, believing it, and then making it truth. And I think you particularly see that often with that black father narrative, and then you see it in, the odd young black boys who don't grow up with their fathers, then internalize that, perpetuate it, and so you almost end up doing their work for them. Being that negative narrative that they are trying to portray of you. So I think that's why it is so important, as Ollie says, to completely try and buck that trend and to tell as many positive and beautiful and enlightening and empowering stories as possible about black people, so that we can stop those prophecies becoming self-fulfilling. I think that's an incredibly important part of it, is bucking the narrative, telling the truth.
Yeah. Oh wow, brilliant. Thank you. Absolutely. Dr. Ollie, you have something to say?
No, I'm just applauding that as a powerful statement. See, without sounding corny, love is the answer. In many ways, it's somebody knowing when they see a young person. I sort of challenge everyone here. When you see a young person of whatever race, whatever background, can we start to just think for a minute? How can I inject something positive into this person's life? How can I tell them when I notice something about them? can I leave them with this idea that, you know, you're really good at this and that, you know, you know, and you know, when we get any sense that there is some self-doubt there, often disguised in humor, can we start to just say, no, I have friends who will tell me when my self-talk is negative, they say, no, we're not having that, you are this. Because when everyone else is putting things down, and you know, I'm not trying to play the kind of the victim card here, but when we have so much around that just bring us down, maybe one of the ways we can really counter this is just leave that you know, counter. You know, I always remember this little girl in school who was told by another people that she was ugly, and she said, no, my daddy says I'm beautiful. Yeah. And I think, you know, and I think it's just that you know, the way we are going to help men, help boys, they might look tough, is just to start to inject a little bit more of that counter narrative that helps people know who they are. I can't stress that enough. That goes beyond any sort of deep intellectual kind of research results we can share. Let's leave people with a little bit of that reassurance that they're enough, and that they're worth something, and they need not apologize for their presence.
Oh wow. Thank you, Doctor. Brilliant. Gina, I was going to talk about economic disparities, but the way both of you just pretty much closed on this, like, that's the summary of it all. That's just the summary of it all. So now let's move on to discussing strategies for countering stereotypes. Dr. Ollie, you have said it, actually. You've said some of it also, Isabella. It's about rewriting the narrative. And of course, but I also want us to talk about some other things. So we had some people in the studio in our last episode, and one of them was a lecturer, and she talked about education. And I know we've also talked about this before, but I want us to explore how, aside from educating people on a one-to-one basis, on a higher scale, given the educational system, how do we infiltrate and then we get our story, say, you know, into history or all of these things? How can we do that? Isabella, do you want to take that away?
You can imagine I'm quite a fiery parent when it comes to this topic. In your own microcosm, I mean, you can do so much, right? I mean, if you have children of your own, you can challenge your children's schools to make sure that they observe things like Black History Month. Not that I believe that Black History Month should be a month. It is all year round, every day, and it's everybody's history. It's not just Black people's history.
Yes.
But yeah, we're all over it with things like that. We challenge our children's schools when they come home with inappropriate pieces of homework. So as an example, I'll never ever forget my son. So bear in mind, this is a half Jamaican, half Indian kid. And he came home with a homework once where they asked the children to list the pros and cons of slavery. Ollie's face is exactly what our faces did, right? How do you expect my kid to even fill that out? Like, there are no pros as far as we're concerned. Yeah, no, right? So my son came to us and he was like, Mum, what am I going to do here? Like, I don't have any pros. And I went, that's all right, son. You go into school with that side empty. And if they call anything, me and your dad are going to come up the school, because that is a completely appropriate thing to ask a child like you to complete. So I think, in our own little microcosms, that is absolutely something that we can do. And challenging people on the day-to-day when you hear things that aren't acceptable, or that are stereotypes, or that do perpetuate a negative narrative. If you hear it, call it out straight away. On a larger scale, I don't know about you guys, but I'm really heartened at the moment. I am an avid reader. I love a good book. And just going into bookshops at the moment, it's unreal how much of the bookstore is books about. There was one that I picked up on the weekend, and it was called Colonialism, A Moral Reckoning. I was like, ooh. There are countless books on this topic at the moment, and all told with pretty truthful perspectives, actually. So that, educating yourself enables you to then educate others, enables you to then call out injustices, enables you to tell the true stories when you hear the counter being told. So I think we're starting to move towards a bit of a turn, actually, where we're seeing an awful lot of phenomenal books, programs. I messaged Ollie after the last podcast, actually, because as soon as I got off the podcast, I sat down to watch telly. And there was a 3-part series on called Africa Rising with Afolayan. And, so there's tons of fantastic educational material out there. If you have the appetite to digest it, go seek it out. It's there.
Wow.
Yes. Couldn't agree more. The challenging of stereotypes. I mean, one that we have faced. I mean, I've got a daughter who is she's 13. She's very tall. She's almost my shoulder height, and so very, very tall for her age. And we sometimes will hear, and she's on the autistic spectrum, and so has quite a number of delays. And we would sometimes hear people talk about our daughter, and the word kind of big and intimidating was being used to describe her. And we immediately challenged them. We said that one of the things that we worry about as she goes into the world she is just a child, as a young Black girl, is that risk of her being adultified. And so we got an apology from the school for using those kind of terms. We would hear codes like, well, your daughter has a high pain threshold, and we say, well, what are you talking about? What do you mean by that? And sometimes, a lot of this is said unwittingly, innocently, not knowing because many of these ideas, these racist ideas, some of which generated from people like Marion Sims, that by the way, if you're watching this, you should follow Isabella on LinkedIn. She usually has tons of really interesting stories. Some of the kind of stories we've been talking about today are fantastic. Her and her husband are kind of knowledge houses. She'll give me that 10 quid later after this session. But you should follow that, because there's a lot of information there. But it's those many of those ideas and those notions that may not be officially kind of subscribed to today are still there in the kind of ambience. There's a whole reservoir of ideas that somehow just seep into by diffusion into the atmosphere, and can still be caught often by very innocent unwitting people, but that's where we come in. But the other thing that, just in addition to what's been said, is just this idea of we need to start to ask ourselves, those of us who consider ourselves to be champions of diversity and inclusion, is what is our ask? What is our ask of the community? What is our ask of an educational system? What is our ask of the world of business? Because we have a lot of these conversations, and they are often like, they are often the equivalent of preaching to the choir, because we have conversations with people who already agree with us. But what then needs to happen after all's said and done is there needs to be a little bit of a coordination in terms of what is it we want to change? What are the things we would want to change? What does good look like, or justice look like? And then let's start to work together to create that. How can we've got this big body that we're calling social justice, and into it is plugged in all the initiatives Isabella is involved in, all Afrikindness, AFBE, all of these different things. How do we ensure that there is a cohesion between the operation of all of these organizations, so that we truly are working towards the greater good? The first thing we must do is deal with the thing we talked about at the start. Deal with those internalized ideas that makes us very quick to place stereotypes on each other and not give ourselves the benefit of the doubt. And then let's start to think, okay, in this broader picture, what is it? What are the issues? Who's addressing them? Where are the gaps? how can we all kind of collaborate on those gaps rather than trying to replicate what each other are doing? Can we start to find ways of collaborating? And and that can be on issues to do with that can be with issues to do with certain attitudes of teachers in an area towards the kids in that area. That could have to do with the provision of facilities. And then the other thing is, can we find others who may not necessarily be from our communities who can collaborate with us, who have exactly the same needs? Because it's that brings about real change. And I think let's start with the self-talk. Let's continue talking to each other, and then let's organize and kind of do something in the community.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Ollie.
Can I just come in on
something
that I learned? And I have to actually big up my husband here as well, because he is phenomenal with Black history, and I have a lot to thank him for in terms of what he's educated me on. But something in what you just said, Ollie, about these stereotypes diffusing through the generations, and something that he made me aware of, that actually then a friend of mine who's a psychologist also made me aware of, is this concept of epigenetics. I don't know if you've heard about this. It's genetic memory, essentially. So if we have generational trauma, genetic memory of what our ancestors went through, white people have the same, right? European people have the same. And so there's this compounding between, as Ollie spoke about last time, the storytelling that, grandfathers tell their children, tell their grandchildren, and then coupled with epigenetics. That is why these stereotypes keep perpetuating so prolifically. And so I think that's where that education piece is extra important, is you have to swat up on this stuff to get that stuff out of your head, right? And to really set the record straight on what the truth is.
Wow.
Yeah. And almost allow each other to help each other.
Absolutely.
As well. In the process of this journey, and even in the course of these conversations, I'm picking up stuff all the time that I'm going to go back and look at. And that's also that's how we grow. Just something else you talked about there, Isabella. I recently was at an event and I met someone who I started to have a conversation with, and in my mind I thought, this guy is, I don't know if he's interested in what I'm talking about or not. He's, in my mind, I just thought he's a white English guy. He's not really going to, not because of that, just because I was kind of reading the wrong signals, if you like. And then then I spoke about, he said he used to work at a certain company. I said, oh yeah, the ethnicity network there is one that is really doing well. And he said, oh, I set it up. and he said, I am this child of a refugee.
Wow.
I says I had a conversation with a Black colleague, and when he had that conversation, something in what that person's saying connected with him and his story, and he used his ability. He used that empathy that he gained from his own trauma, just like if you like, his own passed down trauma. And he used that to create one of, and if I mention the company, you'd immediately know what I mean. They come up with some of the best, I think, frameworks for racial justice that I've seen within an organization. And it was all set up by this guy who I met then. And so that question about, the coalition and the joining up of efforts, so that the things that we talk about actually lead to material change, as we see from this example, is how we move forward. But yeah, as Isabella says, it starts from the education piece.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Wow, it does start from the education. My producer and I, we've been talking a lot about bringing other people in, other people from other ethnic minorities who can also come here, and so that we know that we're not the only ones struggling with things, right? In the last episode we had someone from Malaysia And I started to talk to her. She was talking about her own struggles as a Malaysian in the UK, and I could totally relate. But I had to confess to her that when she told me she was a Malaysian, because I had been to Malaysia before, I expected that she would speak to me in a certain kind of way, and I said, okay, so see, this stereotyping is everyone, we all do.
We all do it.
We all do it at the end of the
100%.
day. But it's about the love, Dr. Ollie. Thank you, Isabella.
Yeah.
And something that you both also talked about is the collaboration and the why. The why is important, and the reason why I want us to go back to it ultimately. I'm a Nigerian, 100%, and one of the problems I have with my people is that the changes we want, I don't think we don't know what we want yet, or maybe some of us do, and so the ones who don't, they're drawing us back, because I see the way people respond to communities. I've seen African communities. I've seen the way people respond to the ones who just give out the food. I've seen a lot, I've seen a whole lot of that. We've taken Afrikindness to some sect, and they just don't want anything. We're saying, let's collaborate. You have so many people there because you're giving food. They need the food, fine, but can we also offer them these other things? And they're saying no. They don't want to collaborate, because the problem really is, how do we break into these communities? Because it seems like the ones who have the people are the ones who only want to solve the food problem. And I'm okay. I don't mind going hungry as long as the next generation is better than this one. So I want both of you to talk to the people at home, the viewers, and our listeners. Let me calm down a bit, because this is sometimes it's just frustrating, right? But I want you both to talk to them about how our people, they're so into the food. I've seen so many things. It's the ones giving out things. It's always the ones giving out things, and people think that is empowerment. So redefining our why. I want us to talk about that. I want you to speak directly to the ones, the ones in our own audience who can hear us, and maybe go out there and correct these things. But how can we sacrifice to make this change happen?
I'm going to let Ollie go because he is nodding emphatically.
Well, I heard an analogy once, and this analogy is based on businesses. It's the way businesses operate. In that analogy, there was a sadistic scientist with an ice hose. He had a banana in a cage, and he had a number of monkeys try to reach out for those bananas. Now, every time a monkey tried to reach out for a banana, the scientist will turn on the ice hose and basically hose them down. And he did that continuously. After a while, the monkeys, the school of monkeys, or troop, got the idea that every time you try to reach out for the banana, you're going to get the ice hose. And so they organized, and every time a person tried to reach out for a banana, they would pull them down. And they started to do that continuously. After a while, the scientist felt, my job's done here. He stopped using the ice hose, safe in the knowledge that every time the monkeys reached out, the other part of their tribe would try to drag him down. And sometimes when I think about the African situation, I sometimes think that analogy describes us perfectly. The things that we have been through and the things that we are going through, and I'm talking, you can take every human wellness, every factor in the human wellness index, and like it or not, Africa is below. And those particular factors have led us to a point where we deselect and discourage, and we have huge suspicions of each other. So the thing I would like to say is, let's start seeing the bigger picture, because in that bigger picture, bananas are good for you, and there's nothing wrong with us. The reason is we have, and the analogy that I'm using here, the anecdote I'm using here of a scientist and citizen scientist isn't any particular group of people. It is a system of injustice that has perpetuated over centuries. And if we can start to get to a point where we understand that this system affects you, whether you like it or not, and ultimately, when one person does well, a rising tide lifts all boats. If we start to understand that bigger picture, we can do better for each other. And that is ultimately what we need to understand. I laugh when I hear people say, I don't see color.
Hey.
Well, this is where I turn very Nigerian on you and say, color sees you.
Yeah, sees you. I love that.
So ultimately, that is what we need. I just need to encourage everyone to be a broad perspective. And if you're somebody trying to drive things and you're getting frustrated, I've encountered that. My sister Nika will tell you how much we encountered that some of the greatest opposition we had at AFBE came from people from within our community. But we just kept going. That's all. Because there will always be a remnant. There's always a group of people who will walk with you. Afrikindness has been around for some time and has already got quite a lot. I mean, you did what was it you did a few months ago, a talk for maybe 1,500 or was it 2,000 teachers in Africa. So and this is something that's just started not that long ago, in the broader scheme of things, but is already achieving, because there will always be those people. So anyone who's trying to drive change and is facing obstacles from some of the people who you think actually could benefit from this, I just say, keep going. Wow,
thank you, Isabella.
Oh, I mean, I don't have very much to add to that, because as usual, Ollie's got to nail it on the head. But I think it's really important to understand where some of that comes from. Again, and that's an education piece on history, right? And we're back to the divide and conquer, and I think a lot of us have still got that ingrained in ourselves. Is competing against our own tribes within our cultures. And there's a beautiful quote, actually. So my husband is Black Jamaican, as we mentioned. He is Rastafarian. And some of you out there may know, obviously, that Haile Selassie is viewed as, some Rastas view him as God, some view him as the prophet. But he has a speech that he did once, and he has a sentence within that I think just encapsulates this beautifully. And he basically called on all people of the African diaspora to organise and centralise and come as one in unity. And I think that is exactly what we need to do, right? Because when you actually look at beyond the African diaspora as well, when you look at South Asians, Southeast Asians, Africans, we have all, to varying degrees throughout history, experienced slavery, oppression in some way, shape or form. And so actually, when you look at it, even the terms like ethnic minorities, I can't handle terms like that, because actually we are the global ethnic majority. There are 85% of the world's population are Black, Brown and Asian. So if you look at things like what Haile Selassie said, and then you put that into the context of the size of our community, what could we achieve if we actually all pulled together and worked in the same direction? And as Ollie said, find those excellent allies that we know exist in the European community as well. There's great strength in numbers, and we all know that. So yeah, I like to try and live my life by that little Haile Selassie quote. Let's just come and organise and centralise and get together.
Wow, thank you, Isabella. I love everything that has been said here, to be honest. But I believe that the one I'm going to really, when I leave here, the one I'm going to sit my children down and talk about is the fact that you're not the only one. I get it. I think that hasn't been said enough. We've just been sleeping on, yeah, we were enslaved. And I think I shared here once that I started a research on emotional scarification and what we have embraced and have now accepted to define us, how it has really played out for us, worked against us. Because indeed, we're not the only ones. There's so many countries, who are not even our color, right? They don't even have our color, and they have been enslaved also, but they pick themselves up, and they make things happen. And as we have identified, yes, go ahead, Isabella.
I'm sorry, I have to just say there, I think that is a really, really, really important point, actually, Peace, is that for many of us, our history starts from either slavery or colonialism onwards. And actually finding out about the history that precedes all of that is where the power is, right? Because then, you start looking into kingdoms that existed in Africa pre-slavery times, like the Kingdom of Benin, Kush, Mali, Oyo, Punt, Axum, like phenomenal.
You're making my day right now.
Hey, you start looking at things like the first university in the world being in Timbuktu, and then you start to realise, actually, we are excellent, and we have always been excellent. And the same goes for India, right? There's ancient Indian civilizations that were showing the rest of the world how you do things in terms of education, cleanliness, social settings, all of that kind of stuff. So that I think is incredibly important, particularly to teach your beautiful children Peace, right? This is what we're reading about, not what they tell you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, and it's also, what's really encouraging is those very things that Isabella was just talking about, the things that we're saying we need to do. There's a lot of evidence of these things that where these things have happened, they have led to great. Just think about the supplementary education programs that have happened all over. Think about those Saturday schools that were organized by Caribbean communities in cases where people would go off to see their child, find out the child's been put in a class for the educationally subnormal, and find out that, and then they started to organize within their communities to actually tell people what they are. And the countless number of people that you will hear who were told in school that don't even think about doing a degree, a master's, you must be joking. And they get within those communities and they are supported within those communities. And, a few, 5-7 years later, they're there with a first class degree in civil engineering and with a master's degrees with distinction, making a difference in their own community. So that we are not a people, and we never have been a people without agency. We've got, so there's so much that can come out of that unity. There's so much that can come out of just seeing the bigger picture. And seeing the bigger picture takes so many forms. It means when you're in a group as a person and you know that there is somebody else who knows how to do a certain thing better than you, you take the step back and you let them do it.
Afterwards. Well, that's one thing that we're so good at, is being each other's hype guys as well. That's one thing that I love about the black and brown community. We're always bigging each other up. When someone does something great, you're there to celebrate with them. I think that's such a lovely thing to experience. And actually, Ollie, while you were talking there, I was just thinking, another thing that I think is really important with the whole education piece and challenging stereotypes is, if you hear a particularly negative narrative, ask yourself why it's that negative. Because as Ollie was talking there, like, one of the greatest examples, I think, of something that he just mentioned, of that, peddling positivity, peddling positive stories, is the Black Panthers, right? The Black Panthers had this perception of, they liked to tell the story that they were militant violent activists. They were not. They were running breakfast clubs for children and telling them about their true selves and their true history, and empowering them and bringing them up to believe that they were something better than what they were being told that they were. So anytime you hear a story where something sounds Just that little bit too negative. Question why?
Why?
They make
Yeah,
it sound
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Sorry, I
Yeah,
Ollie,
100%.
when you said that.
Yeah. No,
Thank you.
that's
Thank
just
you.
truth. I mean, they created the Rainbow Coalition to bring together so many other groups that had similar aims, and they created the very first of these real coalitions where they understood that, you know, it's that quote from Fred Moten, which I won't quote fully here, but it says the coalition comes out of the idea that we know that it's messed up for you as we already know it's messed up for us. It's just happening to you in a different way. We're all in this together. And you know, to put it, the clean church rated version of that quote is the Martin Luther King one, where it says, we are tied with this garment of destiny, where what affects one person directly affects another person indirectly. A lot of that was very well fleshed out by the Black Panthers, for sure.
Wow, thank you so much. You've taken us to school, both of you. Thank you so much. You know, I love that, you know, we've gone this direction. It's been an absolutely wonderful journey. You know, this thing that keeps ringing in my head, thanks to you, Isabella, is divide and conquer, and the solution to that is unite and conquer. Right, so that's the way to go. Support African-owned businesses, celebrate our achievements, you know, celebrate, foster collaborations within our community and even outside of our community. Let us effect this change because we need it. Thank you so much, Isabella. Yes,
I have to do it. I've got another African proverb that I think sums it up nicely.
Yeah,
and we've probably all heard this one, but I love it. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
There you go.
Amen
to that. Amen to that. Thank you so much. Wow. Okay. So as we wrap up, I would love to shine a spotlight on some very successful initiatives and movements that, you know, have really challenged stereotypes and inspired positive change. Okay. So I'm not going to be selfish by mentioning Afrikindness.
Yeah.
I managed to do that. Right. So you want to check out Afrikindness. They're doing absolutely wonderful. You know, looking back now, how we started, you know, I can't believe that we have come this far at Afrikindness, and thanks to you, actually. There's so many things we've discussed here. I don't know why I get so emotional like this. There's so many things we've discussed here that just keep pushing us really deep into what the problem is. You know, when we started, it was about, we didn't even know that it was about the surface, what we talked about. And every time we come here, especially this topic, you both have done justice to it because you've linked so many things. I remember one day, Afrikindness CEO called me and said, what are we doing? You know, she was like, what are we doing? It's too deep, it's too wide, it's too late. I said, it's everything. This is change. Yeah, and this is how change should be. It's a sacrifice for some, so that some of the ones enjoy. But that's just Afrikindness. Even though I said I wasn't going to talk about it, I ended up talking about it. So, yes.
Yeah. Plug it shamelessly. Do it. It's beautiful.
Thank you, Isabella. So, yes, I'm going to give you both the opportunity to talk about the movements that you know that they're doing so much and a lot. Also, this is our own way of also showcasing their achievements, if I'm allowed to say that. So it's also about unity. You know, we're doing the same thing. We're trying to get things changed. And so, Dr. Ollie, I know that Vumi cannot stop talking about AFB, right? So let's start from there. Dr. Ollie, you have the mic. Tell us about this movement.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually going to very quickly, in the spirit of this, also just applaud Isabella and all the work that she does at RS Grassroots, and particularly being a real, what I call dot connector in terms of the Reflect program that's how I first met you, and it's been a really good way of just, there's so many people that I now know, and I know because of that program. and it provides young people with a real sense. I call it a healthy sense of self-worth, and people leave with that, and that's something that you should do. But look into AFBE is one that I have. When we started, when Nika and I first had the conversation, we never thought we would be doing what we're doing now. And over that time, one of the things I'm most proud of is I've seen a community grow out of that. And there are things that we spoke about at the very start, which is about attracting people of all backgrounds into the engineering sector, with a special but not exclusive emphasis on people from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds, retaining people within the industry by addressing that key gap between the time a person completes the degree and the time they get into university, get into the workplace, and raising leaders. And over that time, so many people have passed through AFBE. There are people there who were there at the start. There are others who are new, but everybody has brought something. And it's that process of us just coming together and collectively creating something. It's that community that I'm most proud of, because so much good has come out of it. The people on our board now who we first met when they were in school. And that for me is one of the most important things that AFBE has achieved.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. And thank you for all that you do. Isabella, you yourself, you are a movement.
Steady. No, I'm part of a phenomenal community that is a movement. And actually, I have to second the big up for AFBE. I've been involved with it for a few years, and I think one of the greatest achievements, in my personal opinion, of AFBE is the community that you've nurtured. It is so full of joy, so full of positivity, so full of excellence, and everything that I've ever been to or been involved with from AFBE has been just mwah. AFBE Live last year was literally the highlight of my entire year. It was my favourite ever work event. I'm so pumped for the gala and dinner later this year, the awards. It's a beautiful organisation. So if you don't know them, please look them up. And if you're a company, absolutely partner with them, because they are authentic and brilliant. So you can give me back that 20 quid later, Ollie.
Yeah, there you go.
Absolutely.
But then there are a few others that I think I need to call out. Thank you for the mention of Reflect there, Ollie, because that is something that I personally care about deeply, right? There's an awful lot of chest and energy that goes into addressing the gender imbalance in engineering and technology, but there is this dearth of Black and brown talent going into it as well. And as AFBE actually taught me, that is not because there's not enough of us studying it. There's a lot of us studying it, but there's this weird little drop off that happens. So something is not creating an inclusive profession for those young people to go into. So Reflect is another way for us to encourage young people into the profession, but through different routes that don't necessarily entail university, because we know that there's quite a lot of overlap between ethnic majority communities and low socioeconomic backgrounds. And so we talk to the young people about traineeships, apprenticeships, ways that you can go into entry-level roles and then upskill alongside. So it's a really lovely thing, and it's growing arms and legs, and AFBE are now an official partner of it. RUT is an official partner. We're slowly scaling out Engineering UK. The Royal Academy of Engineering have all been involved in it. So yeah, I'm excited to see where that goes and the impact that has in the future. But then there's a couple that I also wanted to call out if I still have time.
Yes, please, call them out. This is the time to shine.
All right. So one is called the Network of Networks. I don't know if anyone's heard of them. They are amazing. And I'm very lucky because I sit on a steering committee of CNON. They have got the chairs of over 130 UK companies, the chairs of all their race inclusion networks. And the steering committee is comprised of basically the 15 most kind of active of that community. And they do some absolutely brilliant things. So one of the things that they do is the Black British Business Awards. which is about to go into its 11th year, which is just the most wonderful thing to go to. If you have this, if you have been, affected by that thought process that, there just isn't enough black talent out there, go to that and then tell me there isn't enough black talent out there, because it's like everywhere. And it's a really joyous occasion. But they also do all sorts of amazing events, learning opportunities. They have an online community where they bring together all those leads where they can share best practice, help each other out. It's another beautiful community. And then there's one that I do want to give credit to that I feel get an incredibly hard time, actually. And it comes back to what we were talking about earlier, this stereotypes of black men in particular and young black boys. It's an organisation that I'm sure many of you, if you're in and around London and some of the cities in the UK, you've probably come across and may have wondered what they were up to. But they employ an awful lot of young black boys and some young ladies as well, and they take them off the streets. They encourage them to get involved in the editing and production of a magazine.
Wow.
That they sell out on the streets. But the money from those magazines goes back into providing upskilling opportunities for said young people to make them more employable. And the whole underpinning reason that they do this is essentially to try and have a positive impact on lessening knife crime and gang culture in and around London. And they've now spread out to a whole bunch of other cities. But they get a really tough time, right? You know, if you look at the guy that started the big issue, he literally is an MBE now. He's recognised for all the work that he does. The guy that started this, all he gets is grief all the time. You know, why have you got these little groups of black kids on the streets going up to random strangers asking them for money? But actually what he is doing is fantastic. And I think they deserve some recognition for that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, tons and tons. And the one that I have to mention that really deserves it, actually, and this is a tangent for this conversation, but there is a group of white anti-racist allies that I belong to.
Yeah.
And they're beautiful. It was a few people that started it, but they have collected a community of over 500 people. Wow. They are all over LinkedIn. Their purpose is basically to wade in on any slightly remotely racist tropes, posts, narratives, and to challenge them there and then on the spot, but as white people, so that they're starting to take some of the burden off us. Some of that exhaustion that Ollie talks about, they're taking some of that for us. And they're growing from strength to strength. And I think, you know, organisations like that absolutely deserve recognition and credit as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the one that Philip Mix and
yes,
back and
absolutely.
I mean that group as well. So yeah.
Oh,
amazing.
Great.
That's actually next level stuff.
Yes.
That needs to start to happen more.
Yes.
For sure.
Oh wow, wonderful, Isabella. Thank you so much.
We could do a whole other episode on that one, please.
Thank you so much for sharing this with us. These initiatives are truly making a great difference. And I'll even collect the information from you later so that we can post it on all. We want to celebrate the work that they're doing. We see them, we hear them, and we appreciate what they're doing, most of all. So as we come to the end of our discussion, this is to remind our viewers and our listeners that it is important to counter stereotypes, to promote accurate narratives, and empower African community. Like, we can't say that enough. Empower the community by giving the support to even your neighbor. So it's to start from there. Just show that together we can rewrite the narrative and celebrate our diversity and uplift one another. So Dr. Ollie Isabella, thank you so much. I know, we're just, I can't even begin to tell you. You guys have changed my thought pattern. Oh. Yeah, I noticed that there's been a rewirement going on. And I'm not exaggerating, but I know myself, and I know how much this has changed me, the discussion, the depth of the discussion. And we just look at it 360, and it's absolutely beautiful. And so we love the change that you are making. We love the change that you're bringing to not just Afrikindness, but to the community that we serve. So thank you so much for sharing your invaluable insights. It's been absolutely a pleasure having you on the show. And because this is not a physical studio, I would have given you zobo. There's something we call the zobo drink in Africa. There's a drink we call the zobo drink. Looks like red wine.
We'll take a virtual sober.
Yeah, so thank you right here. God bless you. Thank you. We also want to thank.
One last recommendation. If you're looking for a book that actually captures the themes we've been talking about today, particularly around stereotypes and self-image, there's a book called Black Skins, White Masks by Frantz Fanon. And that really covers everything we've been talking about today.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Dr. Ollie, for that recommendation. Absolutely. So we're going to post that on our social media. So please make sure you're following us. Follow us on all our social media platforms, and we will be putting all these things there. More than anything else, remember, together we can challenge stereotypes, celebrate our heritage, and spread kindness like pepper in your jollof rice. So stay tuned for more inspiring conversations. Until next time, keep shining with kindness. And Dr. Ollie and Isabella, thank you so much. I love you both. God bless you. And from you, it's bye for now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Afrikindness podcast, where we celebrate African culture and tell our stories. We hope you've learned something new and gained a deeper appreciation for the continent. Join us next time for more conversation, more stories, and more kindness. And remember, our past, present, and future are interconnected, and it's up to us to shape the narrative and create a better world for our children. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and stay proud of your roots. Africa, Emagba.